Attention Delaware small business owners. If you're looking to grow in 2025, I encourage you to check out the Delaware Division of Small Business Edge Grant Competition. STEM companies can earn up to $100,000 and entrepreneur class companies up to $50,000. Applicants must employ 10 or fewer individuals, be majority located right here in Delaware, and have been in operation less than 7 years.
For more information, visit de.gov/edge.
Today, we are cutting through the noise to tackle the issues shaping Delaware's future and getting to the heart of the matter. Our guest is State Senator Bryan Townsend, an influential voice in Delaware politics and a lawmaker known for his thoughtful, results-driven approach to leadership. Representing the 11th District, Senator Townsend has dedicated his career to addressing the challenges that define our communities, whether it's strengthening the middle class or enhancing public education or ensuring that economic growth is both equitable and sustainable. Today, we'll go beyond the sound bites to uncover his visions for Delaware's future. What does it take to truly strengthen the middle class in an economy that feels stacked against so many? And what solution does he propose for challenges facing Delaware's families today? Stay tuned as we dive into this critical question and explore the path forward for the first state. This is The Agenda. Welcome to The Agenda, Senator Townsend. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
I know that you have a very busy schedule. Dover is jumping back in session, making things happen, new governor, some new faces down there, taking the time to come on the agenda. We definitely appreciate it. We love first-time guests. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the chance, for sure.
Yes. So tell us, not everybody, because this goes up and down the state, not everybody may know your face, not everybody may know your pedigree, which is very impressive. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm proud of Glasgow High School, just
yes,
like yourself. So
classmates.
Go G High, go Dragons. Went to Glasgow, actually went to Stubbs Elementary, 4 through 6, right down the street here. Then Gauger, then Glasgow. Went to UD for undergrad and grad, and then had a chance to go overseas for grad school and study Chinese, and then law school. And then came back home to Delaware, started working as an attorney. And really, what led me to run for office is seeing the education system and what it had become. So different from when we graduated from Glasgow High School.
If you want to start there, we can start there.
We can start wherever you want to start. But from a family of educators, I got my mother, my brother, his wife, my sister-in-law, my younger brother, either teachers or counselors in the school system, mostly here in Delaware, one down in North Carolina. But I was hearing more and more about what was going on in Delaware education since I had graduated from Glasgow in class of '99, and it concerned me a lot. We were getting it wrong. We weren't supporting our students and our educators with the resources they need and the ways they need it for them to do their jobs and teach and learn. It had become such that testing was the biggest thing, and comparing schools, even though the two schools were so different, their student populations, their family backgrounds, everything was so different, but people were all comparing them and testing, and it was out of control. And so it led me to run for office, and I can't believe it's been 12 years, but I ran when I was quite young, and so I'm not sure if I'm young or not, but
you're still young.
That's what I needed.
You're young and I'm young.
Fair enough, and that's what I needed this Friday afternoon. Let me tell you.
Well, I appreciate it. We talk about education, Bryan, a great deal here, and I'm a product of Glasgow '96, and great things came out of those public schools then. And people don't know, you went to Yale. Yeah. I mean, Glasgow, we had foreign exchange students from other countries that came in. We've had, and it wasn't odd that people from our school went on to Ivy League. And the classes were hard, and parents were in the building, and so many things. And it just seems as though, from a district perspective, let's just say Christina, I don't have that warm fuzzy anymore that's happening. Yeah. I know that Glasgow's still doing great things and there's still great kids there, but I don't think it was what it was when we were there.
No, not at all. I mean, I think Christina School District was always sort of the epicenter of the tensions coming off of DSEG, and how, I think good faith people tried to get it right.
Right.
But when you had, families have various choices. I mean, Christina in the Newark area always kind of had some of the segmentation, but then when you had charter and choice and VOTEC really rise as options, you had even more and more families, I think, from that area kind of leave the school district, which kind of leads to the result they were fearful of, which is a district that doesn't have some of the robust parental involvement and family engagement you're talking about. On top of that, there definitely have been some challenges and issues with the school board over multiple generations of school boards now in Christina. So I'm not trying to say it's only external. There are also some internal underperformance. But you add it up, and Christina down the Newark area, and also in the city of Wilmington, accordingly, it's sort of ground zero for education dysfunction or segmentation. And it's just really sad because plenty of hardworking educators and staff, plenty of good families trying to get, but when you don't have as much of the critical mass that some of the districts have to try to lift up the whole district and participate, you kind of end up having what you have there, and it's really unfortunate.
So what, and I hate to put you on the spot, but this is a talk show. What can we expect from the General Assembly in Dover, especially during this session, to address? This is a hot issue. We have a new Secretary of Education coming in. You have the city of Wilmington, who last week the president of the council came on and made it very clear he wants an office of advocacy for the folks of the city of Wilmington, which I think is an awesome idea, just an awesome idea. And part of that is taking this to Dover, bringing people up and saying, hey, where do we stand in regards to education in this community? It can no longer just get pushed to the wayside, but we need to know right now. What's the feeling down in Dover about that?
I think the feeling down in Dover about education reform more generally,
yes,
there's a major commitment to it. You have on the Senate side Senator Tizzy Lockman and Senator Laura Sturgeon, who for multiple years now have been leading efforts to build out the consensus of big change that we need in our school system. You have Tizzy with the Reading Consortium alongside Representative Nnamdi Chukwocha, who've been working, and that's a lot more about kind of education structure, the way the districts are structured and how that doesn't serve our kids the way that they deserve, or educators. So they've been working on that. You have Laura Sturgeon, who's a former public school teacher herself, who's been leading the charge on education funding and finance. It kind of is an extension in many ways of the ACLU lawsuit that I'm really glad was filed and forced Dover to do what it maybe didn't have the political will to do for many, many, many years. But it was sort of the start only. It wasn't the end of it. We have to take a look at how we fund schools and how we have not been supporting kids and families who need the more supports to have that level playing field. So there's been a lot of work that's been happening, building in that direction, some progress, but not enough. And to your point about in Wilmington, it makes sense. Even though the city does not have its own Department of Education, it makes sense for them to have this position and this effort.
They still deserve answers.
They deserve answers. It enables them to have different kind of advocacy. And there just hasn't been, historically, not in the past 3-4 years, a lot of good effort going into building the plans to try and get it done. And frankly, even prior to that, Dr. Tony Allen from Del State had previously led the WEAC effort, and there was a plan in place, and it didn't get done it didn't make it through the politics of Dover, really unfortunately. So I think Wilmington kind of bolstering its efforts to try to have a greater voice in this process is really key. And I know when I heard about it, I reached out to Senator Lockman. I said, what do you think about this? And she's all for it. She's fully supportive. And in my book, Tizzy's for it. Fantastic. So that's a good life approach. If Tizzy's for it, we're good to go.
Keeps you out of trouble.
Yes, definitely. And so but there's a lot of historical inequities, right? We're talking about generations and generations now, really, of families who either blatantly had the short end of it for many, many years, or ever since DSEG and supposed improvements have continued to have the short end of it. I think particularly coming into the 21st century. I think there were some years, when we graduated from Glasgow High School, I just recall, being bussed up from Newark to go to Stubbs, kids being bussed down to, it still worked, and there were problems, there's no doubt about that. There was unfairness, there's no doubt about that, but it kind of was more cohesive than it is now. And I just think that a lot of families and kids that kind of got lost in all the disarray of it all, trying to find ways of unifying the messaging and the policies and really serving them better is really critical.
So I don't want to, and my comment section is always blown up. Kerwin, all you talk about is education, right? So I don't want to get sidetracked on that, but I'm probably going to come back to it. but legislatively, what else is big going on down Dover?
Sure. I mean, education is the closest thing we have to a silver bullet.
Right.
So it's fair if you're engaged on it, for sure. But there are other key issues. Healthcare,
right.
housing are major issues. There are other issues as well. But when you have people have so much instability amongst housing, or you have people going through so much in the way of healthcare issues, either health issues or just inability to afford health care.
Right.
They might have access to it, but they have to make such serious family choices to afford basic health care.
Yeah.
So housing, health care, education, those are definitely the key. I think on the housing side, we've done some really good work in recent years to try and make things more fair within the current housing framework. Now people who are going to be evicted have a right to counsel to be able to help them through that process, which importantly and ironically helps them and landlords have more stability. So that's good. And there's been some housing construction, East Side among other locations has some really good stories that are coming online. But we need to do more. We need to do much more. There's a major housing shortage right now, affordable housing shortage, and we've got to be talking about ways to streamline the ability to, frankly, to build more affordable housing, to invest more in affordable housing. And it's not just a Wilmington issue at all. I mean, Eastern Sussex in particular, tons of, the whole resort tourism area down there, a lot of lower wage workers who are so key to that can't afford the housing in the area. So we have to re-envision mixed use housing and land use. We have to be talking about how transportation options align with housing location. Some people have said, and we actually had this with the new DSHA director nominee, it was in a hearing yesterday, and he said, well, rents are high, but supply is the way to address that, build more housing. That could be true, but that takes some time. You need to find ways of addressing it now, too.
But I haven't met a landlord yet, that has said, I'm going to charge less.
Sure. Yeah.
Once the market has you've shown what it will bear, it rarely drifts back down when it comes to rents.
Yes.
When it comes to rent. So having more apartments, I think, is good, but I don't think that it's going to affect price.
It's not going to affect it enough for sure. I mean, you do have a lot of people trying to get into housing, so that tends to drive the prices up. But the point would be is even if we could build a bunch more in good places and build them the right way, that's still going to take so much time. It's not helping families right now.
Right.
So we got to find other ways of doing that, and we got to find workable solutions. So there are definitely some things we could do that help make housing either lower cost to build or more predictable to build. Or faster to build. We can do those things, but we also, to your point, have to acknowledge that that's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
So we've got to be all in on this, because you don't have a roof over your head, then healthcare, education, that's out the window.
I thought about it, thinking about my retirement. I'm like, oh, one day I want to be able to sell my house and move to Florida and all this other great stuff. That's not really an option anymore with 3 kids. You know what I mean? I have to worry about them now.
Yeah.
Is my backyard now going to be a townhouse development, so to speak, to be able to put them in, or are they going to stay with us forever? Or is it going to be this thing? Is it going to be a multi-family house now?
Yeah.
Is everybody going to? These are real concerns.
Absolutely, tons of multi-family houses. I remember when I was running either my first election or my re-elect, you had opponents out there in the election saying, oh, it must be my first, but they were saying, oh, Townsend lives with his parents. Right, which I was. My wife was down at being a teacher down at in Florida and Teacher America for a couple of years in Miami, paying crazy rents down in Miami. I was up here as a new lawyer, trying to pay off my student loans. Yeah, I was living with my parents because why have rent here and rent down in Miami, right? Yeah, yeah, sure. They said I was in my parents' basement eating Cheetos or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm out there working hard for the community and trying to earn a chance to do even better. But they would go to people and say, do you know this guy, this candidate, this young guy? He's living with his parents. And I loved hearing stories about people on their doorstep saying to these opponents saying, yeah, my kid lives with me too.
Right.
You making fun of me too?
Right.
It's just wild. People don't realize kind of the multi-generational families. And there's some good to that in terms of family connectivity, but there's also tremendous challenges, And I just think the world got so different so quickly.
Yeah.
Right? And the policies haven't fully caught up to it, and we've got to do that. So we need to understand that there are people who are going to be frustrated if a lot of housing goes up in places they didn't expect it to, but we also have to do a much better job of painting the human picture on what's going on right now when we don't have better policies in place. And when people realize that, when they realize the housing instability, the mental health issues that can come from that, the health issues that can come from that, all kind of economic instability, when they realize how it all fits together, most people will say, let's find a solution to this. And there are ways of being reasonable about it. We just got to have the all-in conversation and not be afraid to act.
How fast is that legislation dealing directly with that going to be coming out and affecting people? We can't talk about it anymore. It seems like everybody understands what the issues are. I'm looking for that return.
Yeah, I think a return in sort of 3 to 5 years is possible, maybe even a little bit sooner than that. It kind of depends on what projects are ready and where they are and how much funding and financing we're able to bring to it, how much clarity to the processes. So I don't want to make it seem like we're 2 to 6 months away,
right?
But we're not 10 years away, and I don't think we're even 5 years away. Some of it does end up having, being affected by national and global developments. I mean, some of the supply chain issues we saw before was really hitting the housing and other markets too. But a lot of that has kind of returned to normal to some extent, although normal is not the word people would use at the federal level right now, but so we'll have to see how that goes. But I do think that you could be a year or two, or 3 away from seeing at least the beginning of significant change. And if we act with the kind of the boldness, but the reasonableness that we can achieve if we all come together and are honest about it.
So when we're talking about the speed of legislation, right, I want to switch over to the federal side. It's been a very interesting week. I think you probably know this too from a legal perspective, from executive orders being issued to things being rolled back, so to speak, investigations being done. A lot of people, and I know a lot of Delawareans, because I'm looking over the social media feeds, are wondering about their protections in regards to state rights. Yeah. What can they expect from their folks in Dover? Because fact of the matter is, some of their representation that is in the General Assembly may agree with some of this stuff that's going on and say, hey, we're on the right path, finally. Yeah. People would really like to know, Brian, your feelings on this.
Sure. There are people in the General Assembly who think that what's happening at the federal level is the right path, and that's alarming.
You wouldn't want to give any names, would you?
It can be a struggle to figure out how to answer those kind of questions, quite honestly, because I do feel so strongly about these issues, and you do want to, on the one hand, give names. Yeah. On the other hand, you also want to serve Delawareans as best you can, and be able to work with colleagues, even those whom you disagree with on a lot of issues. It's really important to be able to have relationships to get things done, and if you go out and complain about the parts you don't like about them, then you might not be able to find that common ground you do have with them. On the other hand, when you're talking about people's existence, right? When you're talking about their safety, so it can be a struggle. So I appreciate this.
Rights to be.
Yeah, the right to be, the right to move. It's a struggle. I appreciate you offering the chance. Maybe in another segment we can, especially if you invite colleagues, we have a little debate or something, right?
Yeah.
I think. Thank God. I'll put it this way. Thank God, Delaware Department of Justice is led by Kathy Jennings.
Yes.
I think at the end of the day, Kathy and her team are the forefront of protecting Delawareans' rights and pushing back against the federal developments we're seeing right now. They've done it before. They're doing it again already.
And we have a governor that won't stand for that either.
Absolutely. He mentioned that in inauguration address, and a General Assembly who won't. I think what we need to do right now is understand what's happening in real time. I know Speaker Minor Brown is very keyed in on this. She just said we need to understand what's going on in real time. We need to understand what we can do about it and push back. There are certain federal officials or federal departments that we don't interact with and cannot trump. No pun intended. We can't. But for example, if federal health care is changed, maybe Delaware can step in and fill that gap. Immigration is a key dynamic where it's a federal issue fundamentally. There are a lot of things the state can do to make Delaware, and has done to make Delaware a welcoming community. But if the feds really want to jump in, there's a question of what we can really do to stop them. And so we're figuring that out. I mean, the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, DSHS here in Delaware, cabinet nominee was before us a couple days ago. I asked him. His name's Joshua Bushweller. I asked him his perspective on Delaware law enforcement interacting or cooperating with federal officials on immigration raids, and he got so passionate about it. I couldn't tell at first if he was mad at me asking the question or not. He was passionate about it. And he said no. He said, if people are out there in the community living their lives, posing no risk to the community, doing their thing, we should not be bothering them. So he is not looking at all for Delaware law enforcement or other Delaware state officials to interact or to cooperate with federal immigration officials who might be coming trying to do mass raids and deportations.
The speed at which this legislation is being, or these executive orders, is coming out, and I don't know if we're even going to have time to organize for this or be ready for it, because I honestly don't know. And Brian, this is the same thing that happened back in 2016 or 17 when President Trump first came in office the first time. Whereas you're scared to look at your phone when you get your media buzz there because you don't know what's next.
Yep.
And you know that you're going to have to react to it. Are we going to war? Is somebody banned from being in the country? Are we threatening to take a canal back? Or are we threatening to take Greenland or something? You know, you just don't know. It's almost like an adrenaline. But then you feel like a puppet because they're just doing this to you on purpose.
And you're playing into it, right?
Right. But does the legislation, and then I'm asking on behalf of the people that watched, are you all dealing with the same stress that we are and trying to prepare?
Absolutely. Yeah. The only difference is that we might be in a position to be able to take votes or allocate funds or do whatever else, including public messaging, including leadership, including leading at a time we should be inclusive and trying to all focus on making our community one where work hard, play hard, live well. And so we are taking it very, very seriously. Like as you said earlier, we're like on day 3 or 4 at this point. It does feel different. Before it was sort of like you wake up and you wonder a crazy funny thing happened, right? Then even in the first administration, you definitely realize there are times though like some of these announcements were serious, but now it just seems like the pace and news, outlets that cover this in the past few weeks where there's every signal that the Trump administration was geared up differently this time. They were more familiar with the process, they knew what they could do differently, and they seem to be running with it. So we are trying, again, Speaker Minor Brown, President Pro Tem Dave Sikola in the Senate, leadership of both Democratic caucuses are putting together efforts to monitor in coordination with Delaware Department of Justice to understand what is happening in real time, what can we do about it. I don't want to mislead you or your viewers. I mean, some things we might not be able to stop. Other things we definitively can compensate for. And then there's probably a bunch of stuff in the middle. We want to figure it out. Because it's not just about, some of the healthcare financing is going to have real effects on real people.
Absolutely.
And in the immediate moment, a lot of the focus is on the existential threat. In Delaware, thankfully, we have a lot of protections in place that didn't rely on federal protections. But when it comes to immigration, that I think is a different issue. Where if the feds were to choose to target communities in Delaware, we might not be able to stop them. So we have to kind of figure out what we can or can't do. We want to act as boldly and inclusively as we possibly can. I'll also note, my wife is a Vietnamese American. She was born in Vietnam, grew up in California, she's 5 years old. It's always kind of wild to see people look at her and expect she's going to speak with an accent. Number one, nothing wrong with speaking with an accent. No. But number two, that also evidences people's assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And I don't care what demographic you are. I don't care if you're black, if you're Asian, if you're Latino, there are going to be people who have been here for decades or longer, and there are going to be people from all backgrounds who just arrived.
Right.
So you can't tell walking down the street in Wilmington or anywhere else exactly, what someone's background or story is. And if you're approaching it all with like a us versus them mentality from the federal level on immigration, deportation, you're going to see enemies everywhere. You're going to see targets everywhere, and it's just we can't have that. We absolutely so whether you're a newly arrived person from Africa, a newly arrived person from Asia, wherever you're coming from, if you're coming here and you're in Delaware and you're working hard and you're playing by the rules, then you're contributing to our community and our economy. We should want you here. That's why I want on my team. And it's just really sad to see President Trump back in office now, being divisive and just speaking from a place of just pure ignorance in terms of what these families add to our society.
Yeah, and I think from the first administration to the second administration, you made a point that they've learned from their mistakes, but they've also learned where the guardrails are, and now they're taking those guardrails off, right? And I call him Donnie Dynamite. Donnie Dynamite's just going to go in and blow something up every single day, and he gets an opportunity to do that. And I have friends that, honestly, may be undocumented, and they're really worried. They're really worried here, and I tell them, you know what? Yes, you should be worried, but even for the friends that are documented, then if they don't fit a certain criteria or whatever, and some guardrails have been removed, there's a likelihood that you could be at risk as well.
Show me your ID. Oh, you don't have your ID? I guess you're not supposed to be here. Jump in. You want to think that these are stories from other countries at other times. They're not. They're here.
They're not.
And we got to be very, very careful about it. We've been welcoming for a lot of years now. In 2014, 2015, I led an effort to do driving privilege cards. So basically, we couldn't, from the federal law, we could not give driver's license to people who are undocumented.
Right.
But it was heartbreaking to hear stories of young kids from Sally's or other schools who were driving their siblings around after school rather than doing student activities because their parents were afraid to drive because they were here unlawfully and they were afraid of getting stopped. So we created a card where it's like, hey, look, you come in, you put your fingerprints on there, you have a record there, whatever your name is. We look at your documentation from your home country, sure, but we have a record of you in the system now. You do that, you take an eye test, you take a road test, and you get insurance. You could drive in Delaware lawfully. That helps our economy, it helps our families, it makes for a stronger community. We did that. We've done basically everything we could think of at this point to try and make Delaware a welcoming place for people who are going to work hard.
Right.
But if the feds blow that up, it's not like we can necessarily fix it as they do their thing. All we can do is try to advocate and make as clear as possible that we don't want to tolerate it, that we ask Delawareans to come together and do everything we all could possibly do to try and push back against that.
Briefly, tell me your goals for this session.
I think housing, healthcare, and education we talked about earlier. It's not just like a tagline. These are the things that affect families, day to day. We also continue an effort on climate change and energy, cost of early child. So cost of healthcare, cost of housing, cost of early childhood education. Yes, higher education is also very costly too. It seems like early childhood ed is sort of what people don't really have the options. I mean, at the older ages, you have a little bit of options to try to work through. But we got to figure out how to make these things more affordable for Delawareans. At the end of the day, there's only so much we could do in terms of creating jobs or preserving jobs as states compete for different companies to move and expand and all that. We could do some things, but at the end of the day, it's finding a way to provide the basic public structures that affect families, from healthcare to housing to education, including early childhood education. Focusing on those are the key elements. There's other things too, criminal justice reform, some really good stuff in the works we're doing. But those are the things that really we're all trying to focus on as we head into 2025 here.
Hopefully, next time you come on, we can talk about those other things.
Would love to. Love to.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We appreciate it. Great discussion with Senator Townsend. We look forward to seeing you right here next week on the agenda. Go Birds!
Go Birds.